Switzerland, and Jeff Buckley was playing, and we went to see him, and it was mind-altering. I knew Freddie quite well, and he was a wonderful guy, you know. And, we used to sit and talk about.
We're going to carry on till we finish that. Get on there 25 minutes. Teenagers deserve.
Robert Plant was the legendary lead singer of Led Zeppelin, one of the most famous rock bands in history. He stood on stage like a golden-haired god, commanding audiences with incredible power and a mysterious presence that could mesmerize thousands of people. But underneath his spiritual appearance and his search for musical enlightenment, Plant had a fierce competitive side. He saw certain other musicians as threats to his position as rock music's greatest frontman. Plant was known for his philosophical approach to music, but he was also unwilling to share the spotlight with anyone he thought was unworthy of it. He once told Rolling Stone magazine in 1975 that rock and roll was a spiritual calling, and that not everyone who claimed to serve that calling actually understood its sacred nature. These words would prove to be very meaningful, as Plant watched what he considered lesser musicians try to claim pieces of his musical kingdom. Plant's conflicts with other artists weren't just about ego or pride. They were about maintaining what he saw as the purity of rock's higher purpose. These weren't simple professional disagreements, but major clashes between different ideas about what it meant to be a rock star. Plant believed he was rock music's chosen messenger, and he took that role very seriously. Roger Daltrey, the aggressive rival. Plant's first major rivalry was with Roger Daltrey, the lead singer of The Who. Plant's tension with Daltrey wasn't about their friendship, but about watching Daltrey's raw, aggressive vocal style overshadow his own more subtle, mystical approach in the eyes of critics and fans. The competition grew throughout the early 1970s, when both singers were establishing themselves as Britain's top rock vocalists. According to Phil Carson, a former executive at Atlantic Records, Plant would watch Daltrey's performances very carefully. He would tell his close friends that Roger screamed like he was fighting for his life. But there was no poetry in it. Plant thought Daltrey was all muscle and no magic. What bothered Plant wasn't Daltrey's power, but his straightforward approach. While Plant was weaving Celtic mythology and spiritual references into his singing, Daltrey was getting equal praise through what Plant called brute force vocals and working-class shouting that mistook volume for depth. Plant saw a clear difference between rock and roll music that had spiritual meaning and music that was just loud and aggressive. The rivalry became more obvious when both bands were competing to headline festivals across Europe. At a backstage meeting in 1975, witnesses said Plant avoided Daltrey's after-show celebration. He later told his bandmates that he didn't celebrate with people who thought vocal cords were just another blunt instrument. Daltrey seemed unaware of Plant's competitive feelings, and later praised Plant's incredible vocal range in interviews. But for Plant, Daltrey represented rock's primitive side, powerful but lacking the spiritual dimension that separated true artists from mere performers. Ian Anderson, the false mystic. Plant's second major rivalry was with Ian Anderson, the flute-playing frontman of Jethro Tull. Plant's dislike for Anderson wasn't about musical ability, but about watching Anderson create elaborate theatrical personas, while Plant believed his own spiritual connection to ancient music was completely genuine and natural. The philosophical divide started in 1971 when both artists were exploring folk traditions and medieval themes in their music. According to Terry Ellis, a former manager at Chrysalis Records, Plant became increasingly annoyed with Anderson's approach. He told Ellis that Ian was playing dress-up with history while he was channeling the actual spirits of those times. Playo. Not saw a clear difference between costume drama and authentic connection. What bothered Plant wasn't Anderson's creativity, but his methods. While Plant was drawing inspiration from Welsh folklore and genuine Celtic traditions, Anderson was achieving success through what Plant called theatrical history lessons and academic folk music that missed the real emotional core of those ancient songs. Plant told NME magazine in 1973 that you couldn't fake a connection to the old ways. Either you felt them or you didn't. He believed that spiritual authenticity couldn't be manufactured through performance techniques. The competition got worse when music journalists began comparing their approaches to British musical heritage. At a 1974 folk festival, witnesses claimed Plant deliberately scheduled his performance to conflict with Anderson's set. He later explained to promoters that he wouldn't share a stage with someone who treated their musical ancestors like research subjects. Anderson seemed unaware of Plant's hostility, and later called him genuinely passionate about tradition in interviews. But for Plant, Anderson represented false mysticism, intellectual curiosity, masquerading as spiritual understanding. Geddy Lee, the robotic voice. Plant's third rivalry was with Geddy Lee, the high-voiced frontman of the Canadian band Rush. Plant's mockery of Lee wasn't about Rush's complex musical arrangements, but about watching Lee's high-pitched technical vocal style represent everything Plant believed was wrong with rock's evolution away from raw emotional expression. The clash developed in the mid-1970s when Rush was gaining recognition for their intricate compositions and Lee's distinctive vocal approach. According to Danny Goldberg, a former executive at Swan Song Records, Plant would cringe whenever Rush came on the radio. He would tell his crew to listen to that squeaking, saying Lee sounded like a computer trying to sing, and asking where the human soul was in any of it. What disturbed Plant wasn't Lee's technical skill, but his emotional detachment. While Plant was channeling raw human experience through his voice with blues-rooted passion, Lee was achieving acclaim through what Plant called robotic precision, and vocals that sounded like they were programmed rather than felt. The generational divide became impossible to bridge when younger fans began preferring Rush's cerebral approach over Led Zeppelin's organic power. At a 1977 radio station visit, witnesses claimed Plant walked out when the DJ played a Rush song. He later told his manager that he wouldn't listen to the death of rock emotion in real time. Lee seemed unaware of Plant's contempt and later expressed respect for Led Zeppelin's influence. But for Plant, Lee represented rock's dehumanization, replacing authentic feeling with mechanical perfection that killed music's spiritual essence. Freddie Mercury, the ultimate showman. Plant's fourth rivalry was with Freddie Mercury, the flamboyant frontman of Queen. This was perhaps Plant's most painful rivalry because it was based on pure envy. Plant's jealousy toward Mercury wasn't about vocal technique. It was about watching Mercury command stadium audiences with such complete theatrical mastery that it made Plant's own mystical stage presence seem almost restrained by comparison. Plant actually knew Mercury quite well and considered him a wonderful person. They used to sit and talk about what they would do when their voices started to go. But professionally, Plant was deeply envious of Mercury's abilities. The envy reached its peak during the late 1970s, when Queen's live performances were being praised as the ultimate rock spectacle. According to Roy Featherstone, a former EMI executive, Plant would attend Queen concerts in disguise and leave visibly upset. He would tell his companions that Freddie didn't just perform, he owned every person in that arena, making the rest of them look like they were just playing music. What tormented Plant wasn't Mercury's showmanship, but his absolute dominance. While Plant had built his reputation on connecting with audiences through spiritual energy and blues passion, Mercury was achieving legendary status through what Plant called pure theatrical genius and commanding presence that made everyone else seem like supporting actors. Plant told Sounds magazine in 1978 that there was performing, and then there was ruling. He acknowledged Mercury's superior crowd control while questioning whether it was still rock music. The competitive tension became obvious when both bands were headlining major festivals. At a 1979 European festival, witnesses claimed Plant refused to watch Queen's set from the side of the stage. He later admitted to his roadies that he couldn't watch Mercury do what he wished he could do that effortlessly. Mercury seemed aware of Plant's mixture of admiration and resentment, later calling him a beautiful singer with beautiful hair in interviews. But for Plant, Mercury represented untouchable theatrical perfection, natural stage command that exposed everyone else's limitations. David Bowie, the shapeshifter. Plant's fifth rivalry was with David Bowie, and this represented his most complex artistic grudge. Plant's resentment toward Bowie wasn't about his glam rock theatrics. It was about watching Bowie effortlessly reinvent himself repeatedly, while Plant felt trapped by Led Zeppelin's established sound and his own mystical image. The frustration grew throughout the 1970s when Bowie was constantly evolving his persona and musical direction. According to Tony DeFries, a former RCA Records executive, Plant would study Bowie's transformations obsessively. He would tell associates that David got to be a different artist every album, while he was expected to be the same mystical hippie forever. Bowie had complete creative freedom, while Plant was locked into being Robert Plant. What tortured Plant wasn't Bowie's talent, but his artistic freedom. While Plant was achieving massive success but feeling creatively limited by fan expectations and band dynamics, Bowie was receiving critical praise through what Plant called constant rebirth privileges and artistic freedom that the rest of them could only dream about. Plant told Cream magazine in 1977 that some artists got to explore every corner of their creativity while others became prisoners of their own success. He expressed his longing for Bowie's ability to change like a chameleon. Plant understood that when you met somebody who was such a deity, you had to deal with ego and all the complications that came with the music business. The artistic envy became acute when both musicians were experimenting with different genres in their solo work. At a 1983 industry party, witnesses claimed Plant avoided Bowie's table entirely. He later confessed to friends that being near Bowie reminded him of all the musical territories he would never get to explore. Mick Jagger, the ultimate enemy. Finally, Plant's most devastating rivalry was with Mick Jagger, the legendary frontman of the Rolling Stones. Jagger reportedly earned Plant's ultimate hatred in what became the most bitter and personal feud in rock frontman history. The animosity began in the late 1960s when Plant watched Jagger's stage antics and felt his own blues devotion was being mocked by calculated showmanship. Plant always felt that he and Led Zeppelin might be a little shaky because they were so self-analytical about their music. According to Richard Cole, a former Led Zeppelin roadie, Plant would rant about Jagger regularly. He would say that Jagger had turned the blues into a pantomime act, that Mick didn't feel those songs but was just wearing them like costumes, while Plant lived and breathed every note. The hatred reached extreme levels when critics began comparing their frontman styles. At a 1973 industry gathering, witnesses claimed Plant confronted Jagger directly, allegedly saying that Jagger had made a mockery of everything sacred about the music, and everyone pretended it was genius. Music journalist Nick Kent reported that Plant later told him that Mick Jagger presented everything that was wrong with rock stardom: style without substance, moves without meaning, sexuality without soul. This was the core of Plant's complaint against Jagger, that he had taken the sacred blues foundation that Plant considered his life's calling and turned it into a commercial performance. Jagger remained diplomatically silent about Plant's hostility throughout his career, never publicly responding to Plant's criticisms. But for Plant, Jagger represented the ultimate artistic betrayal, commercializing and trivializing the spiritual blues foundation that Plant held sacred. Conclusion: these rivalries reveal a complex side of Robert Plant's personality. Even though he was considered a mystical rock god, he harbored very earthly grudges against his fellow musicians. The question remains whether Plant was genuinely defending the purity of blues music and rock's spiritual essence, or whether he was simply protecting his own legacy and position as rock's greatest frontman. Each of these feuds revealed different aspects of Plant's character and his beliefs about what rock music should be. His rivalry with Daltrey was about vocal approach and style. His conflict with Anderson was about authentic spirituality versus theatrical mysticism. His issue with Lee was about emotional expression versus technical precision. His envy of Mercury was about natural stage presence and crowd control. His resentment of Bowie was about artistic freedom and creative evolution. And his hatred of Jagger was about the commercialization of sacred musical traditions. These conflicts show that even the most successful and revered musicians can struggle with jealousy, competitiveness, and insecurity. Plant's rivalries were ultimately about his deep passion for music and his strong beliefs about what rock and roll should represent. Whether you agree with his positions or not, the Boishe Kiwad feuds reveal an artist who cared deeply about his craft and was unwilling to compromise his vision of what rock music should be.